The last time I spoke to you, I was staring at a ledger in Pella, trying to determine how long Macedonia could afford to remain at war. The answer frightened me. Then Alexander crossed into Asia anyway. The soldiers called it courage. I called it alarming. Then came Granicus. The king charged across a river, against every sensible calculation, and somehow survived. The generals called it brilliance. The soldiers called it victory. I called it luck. At the time, I thought that explained everything. Then Sardis surrendered, and luck became much harder to explain. People imagine victory solves problems. It does not. Victory creates different problems. The dead must be buried, the wounded treated, broken equipment replaced, horses purchased, supplies gathered. An army is expensive when it loses. It remains expensive when it wins. For days after Granicus, I sat surrounded by lists. Armor, weapons, compensation, requests, complaints. Mostly complaints. The soldiers celebrated. The officers celebrated. I sharpened a reed pen and continued counting. Because victories do not pay for themselves. At least, that is what I believed. Sardis was one of the great cities of Asia. Ancient, wealthy, important. The sort of place commanders point at on maps, and treasury clerks worry about. I had already calculated the cost of taking it, the cost of a siege, the cost of feeding the army while it waited, the cost of repairing engines, the cost of replacing the dead. Then the city handed us the keys. Just like that. Months of expense vanished in a morning. No assault, no starvation, no shattered walls. Just keys. I remember staring at them, not because they were impressive, because they had destroyed my calculations. That was when I learned something important. A city captured by force and a city surrendered peacefully are not the same thing. A burned city costs money. An obedient city makes money. A destroyed marketplace produces no taxes. A ruined harbor collects no duties. Dead merchants pay nothing. Living merchants pay regularly. I assure you, treasury clerks notice such things. For months I had calculated the cost of conquering Asia. Now I was forced to consider a possibility I had ignored. What if parts of Asia chose not to resist? Most people hear the word treasury and imagine mountains of gold. I did too when I was younger. The truth is less dramatic and much more interesting. A treasury is not merely wealth. It is records, lists, accounts, taxes owed, taxes collected, storehouses, inventories, promises. An empire is held together by paperwork almost as much as soldiers. That was true in Macedonia. It was even more true in Persia. I expected the records of an enemy. Instead, I found the records of an empire. Neat, organized, carefully maintained. The Persians had spent generations learning how to govern lands larger than anything Macedonia had ever known. Standing among those records, I understood why Persia had become rich. Alexander did something I had not expected. He did not simply empty the treasury and leave. He appointed officials, governors, military commanders, men responsible for collecting revenue. The machine continued running. Only the owner had changed. At first, that confused me. Then it worried me. Because raiders do not appoint tax officials. Raiders take what they can carry. Kings do something else. A few days later, I watched soldiers receive their pay. It is difficult to describe what money does to an army. Shoulders straighten. Voices grow louder. Worries become smaller. The generals celebrated Granicus. The soldiers celebrated payday. I cannot say they were wrong. For the first time since leaving Macedonia, the Treasury was moving in the correct direction. Not quickly, not dramatically, but noticeably. And that frightened me more than I expected. Numbers had always protected me. Numbers explained the world. Then Alexander crossed into Asia, and the world stopped behaving properly. The calculations I made in Pella were not wrong. They assumed resistance. They assumed sieges. They assumed the enemy would fight for every city. Sardis had done none of those things. That was when I understood my mistake. I had calculated the cost of conquering Asia. I had never calculated the possibility that parts of Asia might surrender. Perhaps Alexander had. For the first time since leaving Macedonia, the books looked better. Not good, better. The soldiers had been paid. The treasury was fuller. The future seemed less impossible. That night I slept more peacefully than I had in months. Then I unfolded a map and remembered how little of Persia we had actually conquered. We had won a battle, taken a city, captured a treasury, but the great king still ruled an empire, and every calculation still depended on one question. Was Sardis the beginning of a pattern or an exception? Because somewhere to the east, Darius was gathering another army, a larger one. And kings do not surrender empires with a set of keys.